Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? I want to talk about something that I've been meaning to talk about for a while. Ron Edwards' fourth video in the Finding D&D series is called Essentialism, and this video isn't really about that, but it's sort of about the topic that he brought up. Because, in talking to him, I guess he got the most flack for that video out of all the videos he made, which I found really funny because it was my favorite. And in the video, he talks a lot about the idea of, instead of like a fundamentalist approach to D&D, in other words, people like, being very purist about what's in the original Little Brown Books and all this sort of stuff, taking more of an essentialist tack, where there's something that's very important about the game. There's this essential piece of Dungeons and Dragons, and they focus all of their energy on that. And they tell you, well, this is the most important piece. But if you look at the text itself, whatever version or what have you, it's not necessarily the only thing there. It's not given this primacy or top of the hierarchy, so to speak. And sometimes you can't find that at all. And he made a brilliant comparison to some religion, and I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but I really enjoyed that. And in talking to him, I believe that I take this concept a little bit further and take it away just from Dungeons and Dragons, because that's not what I want to talk about necessarily. And just kind of the essentialist mindset that we encounter, that we can participate in, that I have certainly participated in spades in the RPG community, where we determined that there's some essential piece of Dungeons and Dragons or of another game or of role-playing itself, and we espouse that as being the most important. But when you go and look at the text, it's not given that same level of importance that we've given it, or it might be absent altogether. And I encountered this quite a bit as I explored PBTA games, which I've enjoyed, and I'm not singling anybody out. However, as I explored these games, as I talked to people, as I got comments back on videos or things that I had done, and some discussions in forums and what have you, I encountered over and over again a group within the PBTA community that were very essentialist in nature, that were telling me and telling other people, there's something about this that you're not getting. There are certain things that make PBTA, make it what it is. There are certain things about the moves, there are certain things about how you proceed with the game, but when I looked in the rules, I couldn't find what they were talking about. And I found that very interesting. Or sometimes I'd find a hint of what they were talking about, but it wasn't given this primacy, this apex on the hierarchy, if you will. It was just something that was mentioned and sometimes absent altogether, which I found really, really interesting. So, as I was talking to Ron, because I got a chance to actually speak with him, he has a video of the two of us talking, which was a hoot. In fact, I think he split it up into two parts. He put me on the second half of a sci-fi video as well, as the conversation turned towards sci-fi RPGs, and so it's he talked with somebody else and then spliced part of me on there. Anyhow, but go look at his channel, find that stuff. And as we were talking, I talked about something that I thought about, and I'm going to call the homunculus effect, which this video is kind of named after. And what I mean is this, as I look at something like old school D&D, for example, or at role-playing games in general, but let's say OSR D&D, there are things that I find that are essential to the game, things that really are the most important to me. As other people look at that same animal, whatever it happens to be, they find different things that they are essential. As the retro clones have been made, and there's several retro clones on my shelf right around there, each author, while it's partly an homage to the original game or the original group of things that made up whatever old school D&D really is, which is part of that point of Ron's video series, each author had certain things that they found were really essential to the experience, that their favorite parts. And know it or not, they tended to magnify those and make the game more about that. And there are other games that aren't quite necessarily OSR retro clones, but they're close, where they magnify things like resource management or whatever. Pick your part of the game. And I found that very interesting. And the point was, what I started to think about is these are like homunculi. And if you don't want to know what a homunculus is, it's not just that thing that a wizard creates. A homunculus is actually this little depiction of a man, but they're very disproportionate. And they're disproportionate. They've got huge eyes and lips and heads and hands and feet and genitals. And it's because it's a representation of the number of nerve endings And there's actually two homunculi. There's one based on motor control, the amount of nerves based on given to motor control, another one on the amount of nerves given to feeling. And they're very interesting little critters, but they're very disproportionate. And in many ways, you can look at some of these other games, these other OSR retro clones, and they can look like homunculi to you because they magnify things that you don't necessarily think are all that important. And I look at one and I say, look at these giant feet. And I can take this a step further and just talk about essentialism in role-playing games in general. There are things that I find float my boat, that are the most important part of the RPG experience. And I can look at somebody else's game. It's not a retro clone. It's just another game. It's not an RPG. And it's whatever that author which was trying to convey, or things that they find are most important in an RPG experience. And I can look at it, and to me, it looks like homunculus. Like, look at these giant hands. Look at these, giant feet. What's up with that? But, the funny thing, and Ron, called me on this, and it was absolutely true. I mean, I was about to say it myself but if you look at my preferred game, or the things that I see as essential to a role-playing experience, that person can look at mine and say, well, look at that giant head, look at those giant ears, look at that giant nose. Your game is a homunculus. So, I don't know, that I was very entertained by that. Essentialism can be very poisonous and very toxic, and we can be very tribal and very nasty to each other. But at the same time, it can be a source of a little bit of levity and mirth when you step back, don't take things so seriously, and look and see just how diverse a community are, and how different the experiences different games can provide based on the hierarchy, for lack of a better word. What kind of homunculus has this author created? What kind of homunculus have you created in your own house ruling or retro cloning or whatever of any particular game? And sometimes, it pays to go check out the other guy's homunculus and see, well, maybe this isn't so bad. Maybe having these big giant hands, maybe that's cool. Maybe you decide you don't like it. But really fascinating subject. So, yeah, different spin on the essentialist topic that Ron had. It can be both. It's a double-edged sword. It has good and bad qualities. It can be very toxic, but it can also be an avenue of discovery and a little bit of mirth. So, that's my thought for the day. Have a good one, kids.